Introduction. My name is Gabriele Columbro. I work for Alfresco now for about 5 years and a half. I've been 2 years prior to that, a partner of Alfresco and a community member for this 7 years, honestly. So I have a couple of hats here. Right now, I started as a solution engineer. I moved as a principal consultant. Now I'm managing sort of the top tier of support for Alfresco. So working in between support and engineering. So it's a global team. So really what I want to do today is sort of give you a rundown about the top 10 things that I've seen over the years, over the 7 years, that you guys want to know about, care about, and make sure that you address for a successful Alfresco projects. So in other words, and that's why I didn't want to spoil this, I've seen things which don't really drive your project to success. So you really wouldn't believe in certain areas how poorly certain projects are dealt. And again, most of the things that we're going to talk about today are generic recommendations in a way as to how to run successful software projects. But I wanted to sort of put those in the context of an Alfresco project. I think you'd be surprised to see or to know what kind of things I deal with in a daily basis, especially on sort of my support role, so with my Alfresco support hat on. So I'd really like to, again, not just for a very selfish sort of wanting to work less, but also to really, Alfresco has invested a lot in the last 2 years in customer success, and so I really would like to be upfront and make sure that all you guys know and don't go through the same errors I have personally and many customers have gone through in the past. So really the two-day objectives are first of all, identify a few key phases in the Alfresco project lifecycle. And if you have been to my session yesterday on the sort of development and deployment of Alfresco applications, you probably will see the same slide in here. So been a little lazy, but certainly then, okay, got this guy. Make the right choices in each and every phase so that you don't have trouble then moving forward. Prevent technical issues and going over budget. I mean, in many cases, I have to face and troubleshoot issues that have nothing to do with Alfresco, that are general project management, technical expertise, sort of clear lacks. Again, not specifically to Alfresco. So I really would like to sort of cover some of those areas here. And sort of, again, mitigate risks. I think there's a lot of talk and rumors sometimes around quality of a product, sort of customizations. Really what I want here is you guys to have an idea both from a product and process perspective, how can you be successful and make sure that these risks are known beforehand and you sort of can predict. So I know that the customer sort of typical project life cycle is more than just 4 basic phases, but again, for the sake of simplicity and this sort of presentation, we'll focus on a sort of a single iteration of your projects. I'm assuming that all of you use incremental methodologies rather than pure waterfall methodologies, which sort of don't really apply very well on software projects. So we just look at a specific iteration. Obviously, we're looking at the first one. So we're talking about, project startup, so inception. We will cover, some tips around development, release and distribution, provisioning and deployment. So let's start from the inception. Well, obviously, a little bit of a spoiler alert here, a little bit of a marketing advertisement here. I've been working for 6 years on the Alfresco SDK. I've presented that yesterday in terms of what huge achievements we reached there in terms of quality of your development. So the SDK gives you a number of tools to preemptively making sure that you guys can develop high quality software in terms of providing unit testing support, for example, but also specifically for the inception phase, it provides the concept of archetypes, so project templates that you can really kickstart your Alfresco projects from. And when I started this, I was still working for a partner, and I realized that there wasn't, I was basically working on a project to migrate everything from Lotus Notes to Alfresco, including 800 custom applications. And I saw that, different development teams in different regions, in different departments, it was a global company, were starting their own implementations, while ultimately we wanted to have a consolidated deployment of Alfresco in production. And typically you would have duplicated implementations on different regions, same features developed by two different departments. So really, the idea of having, more at enterprise architecture level, having a standard way of starting your product, and also a way for projects to interdepend from each other, certainly foster reuse and standardization of your Alfresco projects. So consistency is certainly the first advantage for you to start your projects from the get-go with Alfresco SDK. Secondly, as I said, productivity. The Alfresco SDK 2.0 especially focuses on native integration with IDEs, quick implementation of testing. If you guys do test-driven development, that's your tool. So I think consistency, productivity, and quality are certainly the three reasons why I think this is a great choice. So on a less technical standpoint, and on a more, if you want, ECM standpoint, ECM, according to me, in my experience, is not a rocket science. We're not building spaceships going to the moon. So from a very technical perspective, sure, there can be challenges, especially around scalability, especially when you're going into global deployments. But ECM is really a people business. It's really, it takes a lot of, if you want, expertise and having run this kind of projects before to really get it right, especially when you're talking again about millions of documents, thousands of users, a potentially geographically distributed deployment. Yeah. So my suggestion here is that on top of making sure that you have the right sort of amount of technical expertise and the right tools, again, ECM is hardly, especially in the inception phase, just a purely technical project or challenge. So it's about content, it's about people, it's about processes. And you probably have seen in the sort of different keynotes from John and Thomas how we are trying to put these three items together in terms of growing maturity of the ECM organization. My experience is that typically you start with content. You start, again, I think it sounds obvious to everyone that ECM is about content, but really there's very little point to step into how people collaborate with each other or how documents are transitioned through workflows and processes without having a clear definition of what your content model is, of your content taxonomy is. And Alfresco has very strong content modeling capabilities, but also it has a lot of primitives to define potentially multi-dimensional taxonomies of your content. Examples are obviously the folder structure, you have tags, you have categories, you can define all sort of metadata that can basically infer partitions in your content base. So my sort of checklist when I start an ECM project is really making sure that first you define your content model in a sort of ECM foundation approach for all of your company. The taxonomy as a second step. Then look at the permissions. So really move into people, meaning define your group structures, define how that maps into your sort of organization and who has access to what. Once you have defined the sort of static access, then you can go into processes and define how information transitions between different groups in the organization according to their permission and role. And again, my suggestion here is make sure that you engage with experts that have done this already. Should that be consulting? Should that be one of our partners? I think that's really key to have an initial design phase there. And that obviously brings me to my third point. During the inception, you need to make sure to engage with the right level of expertise. And as I said, this is not purely just, technical expertise or alfresco expertise. While that is, important in terms of, certainly getting mapping your business requirements into the platform correctly from the get-go and sort of knowing your way in the alfresco resources, I think ECM experts are certainly, a must when you are embarking in a especially large, globally corporate ECM project. So we have many resources there externally in terms of, wiki, docs. I think knowledge base articles if you guys are enterprise customer or partners. But the good thing of Alfresco is, again, the open source nature of Alfresco really makes finding resources out there much easier than it would be, in my experience, with proprietary products. Again, the idea of an open source product is that, it doesn't have to be an Alfresco resource. We have plenty of certified partners that can help you out with that. And we also have plenty of, community members. We actually happen to be Alfresco certified engineers or Alfresco certified administrators. So really the idea here is that Alfresco will provide you the core framework and then, work with your local partners and local communities to certainly support you and provide the sort of technical expertise that you need, but also again, business knowledge, much closer understanding of your use case, and potentially, language compatibility. Again, I come from Italy, so let's say we are a little bit requiring in terms of people speaking Italian. So, as I said, ACE, ACA, Alfresco Consulting, partners, and there are additional developer support packages that you can purchase. Premier is one example, but as we'll see in the next slides, we're also launching a new service called Developer Support. I'm in the pilot phase of this service right now, and that may be something that you're interested in to support your development. We'll discuss this a little bit later. Now, this is, again, as I said before, there's some general tips that apply to any project. And again, working in a support organization that is a consulting organization, I've noticed so many times how, especially large organizations, and I'm sure that you guys are familiar with it, the lack of communication between either internal parties and different sort of departments, or even different companies. In a typical Alfresco project, there are 3 parties involved: the partner, and Alfresco and the customer. Plus, many times people externalize, shared services, the management of their IT infrastructure. So in many of these cases, in many of the cases that I've worked on, there's never a clear communication line between the different parties, and that really sort of sets the expectation in a very wrong, or it's very difficult to basically deliver the expected service or the expected level of service without sort of, having a clear communication. And by what I mean here is certainly internally. If you were at my session yesterday, you saw how I explained a lot of sort of the dynamics between development and operations, and how the concept of releasing your software in a clear place, in a sort of stable repository, can really be a clear communication point, a clear cut in the case you have separate development and operations, whether operation is internal or external. Again, make sure that you have a clear SLA with shared managed services companies. I've seen so many times sort of customer opens a case, comes to us, we recommend something, they can change it only a week later. In the meanwhile, it's all escalated, the CEO goes crazy, and there's not really anything that we can do. So you'll see how we maybe can mitigate some of these effects a little bit later on, but make sure that that happens. Same as the sort of business and technical communication. I mean, now as I'm a manager, I moved from an individual contributor to a manager. Happened so many times that I'm reached out from managers that did not have any communication with their internal technical teams, with my guys are working with them, and so we have a completely different story in terms of where we are in the project. So again, I know that these are general advices, but as I now see la creme de la creme of Alfresco issues, this is a very recurring situation. I would say especially in the US side of things, but certainly also in Europe and in my country, that's pretty common. So externally, customer to Alfresco, we are about continuous customer success. You'll see this is one of our core values. That's already, there should be a direct and open communication. I'm all about it. So, if you get shut down by some kind of support relationship, please feel free to let me know. But I think it's most important, as we have many partners here, that there have been cases in which you obviously have three parties involved, like in a human relationship, that sometimes can generate, blame games, finger pointing games, and sort of these dynamics that that are good for no one. And I'm really open into trying to always get the view from my partner, and then get everyone in the same room and sort of pushing in the same direction. So again, this is more both for customers and partners. I think there is a lot of openness from our side to really work together toward the same goal, which is ultimately customer success. Ownership, I think that's clear. The more and more we mature as an organization, we need to define ownership for the different phases of sort of a project. Certainly, you typically own the project, unless you're working with Alfresco Consulting, or a partner that certainly can help you in the full ownership and delivery of the project. But certainly, as we said before, there has to be a clear sort of definition of responsibility between dev, operations, who is actually supporting the operation in production. I think another key point here is, and again, as I work in support since a year, I've seen that multiple times, is who does support your custom developed code? Obviously, there's partners there, but in many cases, in few cases actually, I've seen customers who were delivered software, potentially didn't even have source code, didn't have any clue on how to modify that software, and they would come to us and, obviously we try to support them as much as we can, but that typically ends up in lengthy, complex, unsustainable sort of support process. So again, make sure that you either have your own internal expertise built for that you engage with a partner on a support contract, or we will see later, we are launching this new offering, just called developer support, that can allow you to have sort of an insurance policy to maintain customizations after are deployed in production and have been delivered. We'll talk about that a little later. So we're moving from sort of the inception to the development phase. So my fourth tip is, again, generically valid for any project, but certainly I want to put that into the Alfresco context. You need to use development best practices. And that really relates to me to a bigger concept, which is, as you probably have heard in a couple of sessions, we are really focusing on improving the experience of you guys, how you can upgrade your software in an easy way, especially for enterprise customers. How can you safely and easily apply service packs and hotfixes? And I think certainly there is a lot of work that we need to do internally to make sure, I don't know if you were at the public session, but to make sure that we keep stability in our public APIs. So making sure that we don't break your customization as we put fixes in there. So that's certainly one point. But the other point is, making sure that you externalize your development from the Alfresco web application. Changing the Alfresco web application is gonna run, get you into trouble and make upgrades infinitely complex. So here's a few sort of pillars or pointers, and again, I'd be happy to engage with you in a more specific discussion around developer support, but make sure that you leverage public APIs. We have on the repo side a pretty well-defined set of public APIs, remote, so REST and CMIS. So from a REST standpoint, a quick trick to know what is a public API. If you guys are familiar with the Alfresco web scripts that are on /service, well, whatever it is on /service /API, that's considered a public API. So you can use that API safely. Anything else, also obviously excluding CMIS, anything else, it's subtle to change, so you should not leverage that. From a Java side, we have actually an annotation as of Alfresco 4.2 in terms of what are the Java public API classes that you can and should use to extend your software. Package and version your customizations. Again, I've been working for 6 years on the Maven SDK that covers your project from inception to release. Externalizing, packaging your customization as separate modules outside of the Alfresco application, it is key to ensure that A, we can support you in the best possible way, B, that you can be agile enough to consume service packs and hotfixes in a very simple way. And honestly, if you're an enterprise customer, that is a huge added value of the enterprise subscription. One last point, and this is very technical, but there are 2 versions of Alfresco Spring Beans when it comes to extending the Alfresco service layer, interacting with the Alfresco service layer. You'll always find 2 versions of the Spring Beans. Say, for example, the node service. You'll have an uppercase node service and a lowercase node service. In case you have any doubt, you should always use the uppercase node service or anything, say, wildcard service bean, because that will enforce transactions, authentications, auditing, and any other sort of aspect in the pure aspect-oriented sort of approach that Alfresco provides around the business logic. So if you use the lowercase one, you really need to know what you're doing, and you might run into troubles. So in terms of risk versus benefits, again, it's following these best practices really puts you in a fully supported and obviously much more effectively supported situation, rather than us having to do best effort or you having to sort of purchase developer support as an additional, sort of package. TCO is certainly another area, and I think version currency is really what we are, pushing a lot right now. We have solidified strongly in the last 3 years our service packs and hotfix process, so it's just a pity, a shame if you guys cannot consume those in the fastest possible way. Again, we'll talk about developer support. So, testing, and again, this seems a bit of a joke, but I'm sure that you have seen as well in the Blade Runner style few of these situations in which there is no testing or very little testing going on a customization. Now, considering the disparity, the several Alfresco use case, the several use case that you can implement on Alfresco, there's very little chance that we can test any possible use case that you guys are going to implement. So again, there are a few flavors of testing that we are more and more providing support for. I think the Alfresco SDK 2.0 provides a huge sort of added value there. But I first would like you to sort of follow me on the different type of testings that you can do and which tools you can sort of leverage there. And again, I'm going to do a blog post soon on this around sort of clarifying and be a bit more detailed as to, with the SDK 2.0 final version, you can be successful on, developing high quality, tested, potentially test-driven developed applications. So unit integration and sort of black box testing can be easily done with the Alfresco 2.0 SDK. There are a couple of things that we need to finalize integration. We worked a lot on that at the hackathon on Tuesday, but with the 2.0 final, you can expect unit tests to be run in an actually very fast fashion without having to pull up the whole Alfresco application context. Integration tests, same way, potentially even running remotely integrated in the Alfresco running web app. Black box and regression testing. This is a brand new thing for the Alfresco SDK. You might have followed Michael Suzuki's presentation. He introduced the concept of share PO, share page object. We basically have built a full abstraction library for the share user interface. Something based on Selenium that basically allows you to just, in Java, go there and trigger events on the application. So like share.getPage, .getBanner, .getButton, .click, something like that. So that really models and gives you a way to be a little bit less abstract when you're doing your UI testing. And in this case, what you can do is A, run the out-of-the-box Alfresco tests to make sure that your development did not break any out-of-the-box functionality, so purely regression tests. Plus, you can develop your own and make sure that your tests moving forward or your new developments do not break your functionalities. Load testing. Apart from the SDK, I've been working for 2 or 3 years in the scalability. I've wrote a white paper there. We have now a fully open source Alfresco benchmark framework, which you'd find on the Alfresco SVN. Derek Hawley has presented about it a couple of hours ago. It is sort of cloud scale, so there is a little bit of learning curve there, but it certainly is flexible to basically get to the level of scalability that you need. There are a number of out-of-the-box tests, certainly one that uses Selenium for the shared side of things. We have CMIS and web testing. We have, a whole number of fully open source available for you. So you don't really need to redevelop your tests. Yeah. Lastly, if you're running a very large implementation, and here I'm talking about, tens to hundreds of millions of documents, tens to hundreds of millions of thousands of users, let's say, you should consider a proof of concept. There's only so much that we can test, even load test, when you have so many use cases that can be potentially implemented on Alfresco. My point is that in ECM, there's no one size fits all. Now, let's move into the release side of things. I have, again, discussed this a lot yesterday in terms of sort of how the development and the operation side of things are more and more converging into something that we all know about as DevOps nowadays. So I think that more and more the, clear cut and the division between the development and the operation world, as we knew them before, are sort of less and less. There's much more of a gray area in which sort of the development and the release process and the delivery process are an infinite life cycle and continuously feeding back sort of monitoring data, usage data, performance data into your next iteration. So sort of make sure that this is something that once again relates to the communication bit before. Make sure that your continuous delivery process is in place. Again, I started 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and it was really complex to do things like continuous integration, continuous delivery on Alfresco projects. I think now with the Alfresco SDK and other tools like Deployment Portal, Alfresco Boxes, we are really we have a story from beginning to end to implement this type of life cycle. in terms of being more specific there, as I said before, this applies to any project, but you would be surprised to know how many people are still editing things in production, changing JavaScript files, swapping jars. Okay, I'm not going to go much more into that, but I guess you know. Otherwise, I get all Italian on you guys. So, release early, release often. To me, the concept of release is really fundamental. Make sure that you have proper packaging, automate, collaboration between developer and operations. I think a process of promotion, having multiple environments and know how you promote your application and your data between these different environments. Alfresco, you know, he's peculiar in the way that sometimes you have part of the application logic in the data, for example, in the data dictionary folder. So it's really important to define how, with external tools and potential processes that you have, you promote contextually and safely application code and data between environments. I mentioned quick Alfresco boxes. This is really a good aggregation of sample technologies, Chef, Vagrant, Packer, Docker, for the deployment side of things, and make sure that you can do continuous delivery. Now, moving into sort of the last point, which is provisioning deployment to production. As I said before, there's no one-size-fits-all. Alfresco itself, the out-of-the-box distribution that you download is actually tuned for an evaluation. It's not meant to just, you know, throw that in production, no change. And actually, we are making some changes there to 5.0. We are actually raising some of the default parameters, again, to minimize the possibility of error. So we're sort of kind of again, raising a little bit the out-of-the-box scalability, if you want, of a single Alfresco installation, but there's much more to it. First of all, know very well your Alfresco use case. If you're a partner, ask the right questions. Make sure that you know what your documents are, how they look like, what the, you know, interaction pattern is, whether it's more search, read, write. If you check out my scalability blueprint, you'll see that there is a huge sort of probably 20 pages, I'm quite verbose, discussion as to how you want to decompose the questions and sort of the use case, and then turn that into a load testing model, into a scalability model that you can either discuss with us, you know, or certainly feed to your partners to, you know, for a proof of concept, or for in general a load testing procedure, which is certainly a healthy part of any large deployment. The sort of continuous delivery process that we said before allows you to implement a sort of strong feedback cycle into what you're developing in the next iteration. And certainly there are tools like, for example, Luis Capaceira session that is actually unluckily ongoing right now, but he's produced a very nice tool to load up your repo in a very quick way, and therefore to emulate quickly, and sort of, you know, it's very configurable to sort of match your use case, and, you know, that will allow you to certainly start up a POC in a POC time, so in a contained, predictable amount of time. Now, this is more from a support standpoint. Again, I've been working as a consultant for 2 or 3 years. I've been doing firefighting for a while. And obviously, most of the times I was sent to a customer to work in production environment when support could not do anything there, because in support, the support engagement model, you know, we don't want to touch your production environment. We don't want to suggest qualitative best practice to your production environment. We might do and try that in a non-production environment, but that's why typically a consultant has to go there and sort of with an additional level of understanding and ownership of the project. But if you are, you know, one easier way to engage much more productively with support is make sure that you have a replica of your production repository. I mean, most of you hopefully have more than one environment, including a test environment. This test environment, as we all know, should be as similar as possible to production in terms of specs, but also in terms of data. Make sure that you backport your data. So it's not only promotion of your code and data, but it's also backporting of your data from production, so that when you engage with support, we can help you in a non-productive environment. Or when you engage with your partners, they can run load testing in a non-production environment, figure out performance or functional problems there before going to production. And I know that in many cases, large multi-petabytes implementation, you might not have the same level of storage or resources in pre-production. But first of all, try to budget for that first. And secondly, the more the merrier. So even if it's a downsized, downscaled sort of copy, that's good enough, but obviously the closer, the better. Then there are tools like, Alfresco BART that will allow you to easily sort of do backup. BART stands for backup and recovery tool, backup and restore tool. Scripts that allows you to do this in a much quicker way. Now, monitoring, again, general recommendations, but seriously, there's so many people that don't have a clue of what's going on in their production environment, simple as that. And they throw at us huge amount of cases, stack dumps, and thread dumps, without really having an understanding of how the system is being used, what sort of usage paths, component of the system, underlying infrastructure component are being used, and how they are being used. So again, in this case, there are basic things that you can monitor with pretty much any tool, like Nagios, Isinga, or any New Relic, AppDynamics, that are free, paid tools, on-premise, cloud tools. I really actually love a lot New Relic lately, because it allows you to really drill down from the web layer into the Java layer to the database layer, sort of follow a single request there, plus giving you more statistics, aggregate information. And so, as I was saying, there are certainly specific sort of general things like CPU and memory and disk that certainly can help. But for Alfresco, you can also monitor the size of the indexes, the folder structure of the indexes, how your DB is performing, whether you're using your DB tools on some JDBC monitoring driver, the size of your content stores. Your network is fundamental. So one thing that I'd like to mention here, and that's why I'm bringing up the sort of Heisenberg-Schrödinger principle, is that you don't want to over-impact the application as you monitor. I've worked in so many cases in which the profiler was installed there, default configuration. As soon as I turn off the profiler, one share request goes down from 1 minute to 3 seconds. So make sure that that the observer pattern, that you're not over-observing in a way that you are over-impacting your application. So there's going to be always a little bit of Heisenberg-Schrödinger, but let's not make it so big that it's not meaningful anymore. So we are at the last tip here, and again, so a little bit of a marketing alert here. First of all, these are our corporate values. As you can see, the sort of connecting value is continuous customer success. This has been a very important focus since the new management came in. Doug is all about customer success, and we have felt it fundamentally in the way we work in customer success, in the feedback of customers, in the way we invested in customer success, and more this is turning back into product changes, product enhancements. You'll see with 5.0 how we are working into improving the upgrade experience, the installer experience, the SDK. So all of these sort of customer and partner facing components of the Alfresco infrastructure are being improved as we speak in product. But apart from that, obviously, we have tools available that you can use, fully open source. The Alfresco environment validation tool, you should be familiar with it, is a simple tool that you can execute in an environment to validate general Alfresco environment sort of minimum prerequisites. We have a more sort of younger Alfresco technical validation tool that we are integrating in the SDK to validate your customizations according to best practices, so that you know from the get-go whether you're developing something that is high quality, highly supported, and high longevity for you to sort of do upgrades in an easy way. We have administration consoles, we have the benchmark framework as I mentioned, but obviously, and here is the marketing alert, we got some services that you can use. You probably are familiar with support, with Premier services, with consulting as a sort of staff augmentation, ownership of part of your developments of your projects. But what I would like to introduce to you as a sort of a first time here is the service of developer support. It is pilot services that we are running, we're starting right now. We are planning to finalize sort of the beta phase by the end of this calendar year. But the service is already running right now and is being delivered by my team, which is the expert services team. So it's basically very developer savvy support engineers with a direct line to engineering to basically help you on I'll describe the services in a little more detail later on, but it's really complementing the standard support services, tailor-making it for developers. So whether you are a partner or a customer and you need sort of a engagement model to ask questions as to how I can do this on Alfresco, what is the best scalable way for me to do this on Alfresco, can you help me troubleshoot this customization, can you help me improve or maintain or extend this customization. So really it's a support offering for developers. Okay? Now, again, these are more general information. It is a subscription, pretty much like the Alfresco subscription model. And as you can see, that's the sort of initial response time SLA. This is the, we kind of want to make sure that obviously there is a little smaller, a little longer SLA than production support. So this is not like a follow the sun 24/7 type of offering, because typically development questions have a a less pressing timeline. Your system is not down. Just to be clear. Again, here are a few areas. I'm not going to go through this pretty busy slide, but a few areas where we can help you with: SDK, developer productivity, testing, usage of the API, how to map a specific use case into the Alfresco API in the best possible future-proof way. If we know that the product is going somewhere else and maybe it's not been officially communicated yet because it's been in discussion, we can help you preemptively being sort of on the right track. The other important part, as I was mentioning before, is you have a customization, it's deployed in production, you have no expertise or little expertise how to maintain it, improve it, or even support it if it breaks. We can help you with developer support as an insurance policy to support your customizations in production. Again, another very busy slide, but this, and again, you can download this from the public Summit website as soon as I upload it, but this is a differentiation between support, developer support, and consulting. In a way, my one-liner is developer support offers consulting expertise the support way. So the engagement model is typical support, so you will have a ticketing system when you can open cases, but the sort of expertise is, consulting level, developer level. Now, this is a pilot, so I'm going to put a few business cards here. You can always reach out to me if you are interested in this. I think this has been over the years a very sort of gray area of support that especially technology partners, OEM, and large customers have asked us. So I'd be happy to have a conversation with you in case you're interested. My email is gabriele.columbro@alfresco.com, or you can come and find me at the expert bar, or any way you want to contact me. I'd be totally happy to help you out on this. Said that, we're off. I think we're out of time. So if you have any questions, I'll see you. You can come here. I'll see you at the expert bar. Thank you so much.